Hi guys, Andy N, spoken label, back in the house on a Sunday evening, and it's bloody freezing. Oh my God, it's bloody freezing. Now, I've got a fantastic writer with us today, Alice Godliman. Alice is just bought a book out in the wonderful Bentkey Publishing, and as sure you'll find out shortly, has some interesting outlooks in life. That's a good way of putting it, Alice, really, isn't it? So now, I met you originally November last year for the night I covered in Chilton Come Hardy, Speakeasy, which I run with Amanda Nicholson and Steve Smythe. And me and Amanda loved Alice's work. So they made a natural progression to bring her on today to a spoken label. Now, Alice, start off with, as always, tell people obviously who you are, where you originally come from. Because I know you're living in Levenshulme at the moment. And
Yes.
what starts you off with your creativity?
So hi, I'm Alice, and as you may notice from the accent, I'm not originally from Levenshulme. I'm from down south, sort of the London, Kent, the smushy area in between London and Kent. Moved up to Manchester 5-6 years ago now, and have never looked back. Don't want to go back down south. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, I can't blame you. Can't blame me because I used to. My second girlfriend actually came from a family was partly in Leighton. Or first girlfriend actually, I'm getting years mixed up. She had family in Leighton and family in Tunbridge Wells.
Yes, Tunbridge Wells is very close to where I grew up, so yeah, I know it. Like I say, I love London. Don't really much want to go and live there again. Sorry, Londoners. But and I'm a poet. I, as you said, have just published a book with Bentkey Publishing, which is very exciting. And yeah, I've been writing pretty much forever, but started to take it all a bit more seriously maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and signed up to a open mic night kind of on a whim and was like, oh God, now I've got to write some poems. Okay, then.
Wow, brilliant. No, fair play to you. That it's one of those sort of things, isn't it? When you do those sort of things on a whim, you can laugh to sit there thinking, oh, what have I done?
Yeah. I kind of need a deadline to get me to stop tinkering with things. I will be editing stuff until the second before I get on stage. I'll be sitting there right before, like kind of scribbling words out and going, no, actually it should be the instead of and that kind of completely unnecessary. So I kind of need a really enforced deadline. Otherwise I'll keep rewriting the same thing 100 times. This was actually something that was quite scary for me with publishing a book, is the fact that once it's out there, I can't do that last minute scribbling on it before I get on stage, because it's a physical book that no one else gets to see those changes if I make them. So I've got to be happy with it. So yeah.
Right, we better talk about the book now anyway, because certainly the book itself is quite unusual actually, a poetry book, because I really have enjoyed this book, but it's something I've not seen done before in poetry. And I'll let you tell people why it's quite an unusual book.
Yeah, I think I always knew it was quite unusual when I started sending it out to places, and I was so grateful that Rebecca at Bentkey kind of saw that it was what it was made of, I suppose. It's called The Book of Seeing Past the Shadows, which is sort of a play on A Book of Shadows, which is a witch's spell book. And the poems in it are sort of spells. They all come with a list of ingredients. And some of those ingredients are a little bit esoteric and strange. They're sometimes like, you will need human skin and silence and that sort of thing.
Yeah, we'll give an example here of this. Some of these are not recommended, where if you go and look at the first poem, ritual sacrifice for telling the truth. Yes. The ingredients for that are an altar, preferably somewhere public, a knife, metaphorical, and the acceptance that you may or may not be understood. Yeah, so it's
yeah, that poem, actually, it's right at the beginning, because for me it sort of sums up what the book is about, which is it's about me trying to be honest with myself and trying to tell the truth. The whole point of this book is, and the reason it's called the Book of Seeing Past the Shadows, is it's supposed to be about kind of getting to the truth of things. And sometimes the truth of things is just understanding how it is that you actually feel about life. And I feel like sometimes we're so busy flying our way through life that we don't stop to think, how do I feel about this? Actually, what do I want to do? So that was sort of why, for me, that poem was really important that it go first, because it's like this big statement of like, this is what I'm trying to do here. Is like, just listen to me. These are the things I have to say.
Yeah, no, you can see it's a fantastic intro to the book straight away. I think as well, we put in the list of ingredients at the top part of it. It's like it opens your eyes up straight away, thinking, "Oh, that's a statement and a half." Straight away. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, tell us about what led you into doing your poems in this style, then, because this is a very, I don't like the word unusual. It's not. It's a very individualistic. That's a good word for me on a Sunday night. Style straight away. So.
Yeah, it's some of the poems actually existed before I settled on this as the style for what I was doing.
Mm.
So some of the poems previously did not have lists of ingredients and were maybe slightly different. And it was really when I started trying to collect things into something that was a cohesive piece, that, and I was looking at them, I realized sort of what I'd been doing without meaning to, which was writing things that felt very paranormal and occult and mystical. I think it's a really interesting question when you talk to poets, if you ask them sort of, what are the images and ideas that you keep coming back to? Most writers will have their, like, I don't know, almost like your own paint palette of the stuff that you like to use when you're talking about things, and mine are often just kind of weird spooky stuff because that's who I am. And so I realized that I'd written all of these poems with either really mythological or really occult kind of references, so it just made so much sense for them to sit together as a spell book. So some poems existed for months or even like a year without having this list of ingredients then ascribed to them, and some of them didn't. Some of them I then knew, this is how I'm writing, and started with the ingredients. So it was a kind of higgledy-piggledy way of putting it all together. But I think that's, especially for a first collection, I think that's often what people do. They're like, oh, what have I written then? Okay, cool. I didn't realize I was making this, but I have.
Yeah, Dan, I was like that in my first book years ago, to be honest with you. I was like, I treat it as a statement of this is who I am at the time. I think I can see that in this, but it's also because what you've done is very individualistic straight away. And I think it does stand out actually really, really well. That's why. So did you realise that was it actually planned to be a book at the time, was it? Or did it just kind of develop at its own pace and catch you out?
There was a point where I kind of realized I really wanted a book, and I knew I'd written enough to have one kind of thing. So I started going through the stuff that I had to make it a book. But definitely at first I was just writing poems. And I think the pandemic had a lot to do with it as well, because prior to the pandemic, I was writing, like I said, I'd sign up to open mics and then be like, oh, I've got to write something. So I was sort of writing with the stage in my head as the end goal was me standing and reading in front of people. And then when the pandemic happened, I started writing a lot more just to be read rather than to be performed. Yeah. And it actually, a lot more than I thought it would, it really changed the way that I wrote. And that's when I was like, actually, no, this is the time for me to have a book now, because this is how I'm writing. I'm writing for other people to read. I think sometimes I know so many poets who are fantastic performers. You see them and you're like, this is incredible. And then you read their work and it's good, but it's good because you've heard them read it. So you're reading it in their voice. And you know that if you weren't, it would still be very good, but it's not the same. And I think I was suddenly writing to be read on a page rather than to be performed. And it felt a lot more appropriate for a book.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you straight away with that one. I think there's a fine line between performance poetry and performance and itself page poetry. It does cross over, I think, sometimes, but not always. So it's that's straight to it, and I get you completely with that and what we mean with that. So yeah, how was your obviously I've seen you read a couple of these pieces out of Speakeasy and stuff. Explain to me then how it differs for you then when you're reading these poems out on stage then.
Oh, I don't know. It just, I think I've realized that as a performer, I'm quite a quiet performer. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I'm definitely not this kind of shouting, you need to pay attention to me now kind of person. And it's just the way that it's just what suits the poems, really. They're quite thoughtful and they're quite they do just feel like quiet pieces that kind of deserve to be listened to and really thought about.
No, I think with you and you had at Speakeasy, you had the audience in the palm of your hand because the word carried you. I've always believed that. You can be some pieces you can shout, and I've got it myself, to answer you. But some pieces they're telling you and they want it done in a different way, aren't they? Almost.
I completely agree. And I used to be a teacher, actually. I used to be a secondary school teacher. I'm going to be honest, I wasn't great at it. It wasn't for me. I'm not really scary enough to be a secondary school teacher.
Oh, I couldn't
but
I'd get
it was
sacked.
one.
I'd get sacked for punching the kids, and I would.
I mean, there were times that I wished, but no, that's probably not something I should be saying. It's not true. I'm exaggerating.
This bit might get edited.
It was something that I learned as a teacher, that if you're shouting, they don't always listen to you. And sometimes if you get really quiet, it kind of makes whoever's in front of you go, oh, something different is happening. And I think I kind of took that lesson with me onto the stage when I started performing, which I still love doing. I know I said all of that about I started writing for the page instead of for performance. And I do think that's true, but I love performing. There's something really freeing about it. I can be quite a socially anxious person, but stick me on a stage in front of a bunch of people and I'm like, anxiety who? Never heard of it. I'm fine.
You do it does strange things to you to go on stage sometimes. It was like certainly when I started performing 15 years ago now, I was like you said at the time I was really quite socially awkward. And you get me on stage, it's like a trigger, it's like flicking in your head sometimes.
It really is. And I think there's this real kind of barrier when you're on the stage. It's like, I'm here, here's everyone else, no one's going to talk to me, so I can just do my thing. And I really enjoy it. I find it really interesting as well, because I wrote this book and I hadn't actually performed that many of the pieces before I started then going out and trying to promote it a bit. And people sometimes really respond to things differently than you think they're going to. Like poems that you don't think are that interesting are the ones that people go, oh my God, that piece, that was incredible. And I love that. I love being able to kind of see how things are landing with people.
Yeah, no, you do. It's sometimes you can find when you go on stage, and I've seen it happen to me before now, where you go on stage and you can get the incredible reaction, but it's the one that always sticks in my head sometimes when I've got one or two pieces where you go on stage and there's a line that makes an audience howl laughing. And you're sat there thinking, that wasn't wrote as a joke.
Oh, no. Yes. Yeah, there's a piece in my book that I think I will read later, that when I wrote it, I was like, this piece is maybe a little bit trite and a bit cliched, but I kind of needed to say it, so I've written it anyway. And I didn't think it was that clever or interesting. And that's the one that people have come up to me after performances and been like, that piece, I'm so glad you read that. That really resonated with me. And I'm like, wow, maybe it's not as trite, and maybe it's trite and cliche for a reason, because people want to talk about it. I can't hear you, Andy.
Sorry, yes, sorry. The signal bounced. Sorry, everybody, that then. Signal bounced and it went muted me for some reason. So anyway, what I was going to ask you then, Alice, was I'd never liked directly addressing poems in books, but the one my favourite in the collection was Song to Summon a Storm, because I loved all the references to broomsticks in that one as well. So tell us obviously then how this piece developed then, and how you actually structure this as an example of your spell poems.
Yeah, so Song to Summon a Storm, there are a few pieces in the book that's sort of about anger and wanting to live a kind of authentic life, I suppose. And Song to Summon a Storm sort of uses this correlation between an actual storm in the weather and this idea of like domesticity, like women sweep up and the storm outside also sweeps up, those sorts of parallels. And so it sort of grew out of that. And I was trying to make all of these kind of mirrored parallel references. And I actually think that's one of the ones in the collection that has the most structure. I'm not a particularly structured poet. I can go off on all these tangents and get really caught up in my own metaphors a little bit.
It's called being a poet. It's called being a poet, right?
Yeah. But that one, I realized I kind of had ended up in these kind of real finite chunks, that the things I was trying to say kind of tied themselves up really well with the kind of correlation of being a woman who is unhappy with your lot in life. I was imagining like these really unhappy 1950s housewives, like that sort of thing, versus a storm outside on the street, and how to draw those parallels. So I think there are 3 sections, like sweeping, breaking, and taking, or something like that, because I also thought about throwing a tantrum, throwing things around, and also this idea that like kleptomania is seen as such a female problem. It's a really gendered issue. And maybe why is that? Why is it that women feel like the lives that they have aren't really enough, I suppose? And also I just really like the idea of a broomstick because it's a witchy collection. Are you on mute again?
Yeah, I'm muting myself again. The signal's bouncing.
I'm so sorry.
I know it's you know what it's about. It's because I'm speaking to a witch on Zoom at the moment. All these other witches in the world are pouring spells on it to make life awkward. Now,
like Gremlins and The Wires.
Oh, definitely, it's most definitely Gremlins tonight. Something. It's Halloween about 7 months early, I think. So no,
it's always my Halloween decorations are still up. I can see them from here. I never took them down, so maybe it's my fault.
Who knows? Anyway, the couple of things I want to touch on today now, obviously, before we can tell people where you can find your book and what plans you got for the future and stuff. Because obviously, you've got your own podcast going, haven't you, as well with 2 co-hosts. So tell us about this podcast or podcast next.
Yeah, so we have a podcast called Queer Girl Film Club. It has been going for a little bit over a year now. We've done 3 seasons. They're quite short seasons, and it's me, my girlfriend, and a friend of ours doing, we call it the classics and not so classics of queer girl cinema. So it's essentially just we watch films about queer women and then we review them and we talk about them. And I think it's very good. It's sometimes a difficult podcast to sell to people, because if you are a queer woman, you're like, oh yeah, I know all the films you'll be doing. And if you're not, I'm like, have you heard of this film? And people are like, no. But
Give us a
we've
few
done,
examples then. Give us a few examples.
so we've done episodes on Bound, Mulholland Drive, But I'm a Cheerleader, Carol. We recently, and by recently I mean yesterday, went to go see the new Kate Blanchett movie Tar,
Oh yeah.
and then immediately recorded our podcast on that, which actually my girlfriend is in the other room editing it as we speak. So
Look at that, see? Hot off the presses, right? So
just an incredible factory of podcasting happening right now. So if you are interested in that, definitely go and listen. We're very good and very funny and very insightful. And you can just scroll through the archives, and if you've seen one of the movies and want to hear what we've got to say about it, then go listen.
sounds good to me. But definitely, I'll be checking it out. Definitely that one. So I've always do like hearing film talk podcast. Definitely. So, okay. Now the other thing I want to talk to you about today is, and this is something I came across before, and people always wondering when I do spoken label sessions, I do a fair bit of research on people, and was the video piece you did a couple of years ago for Blue Balloon Theatre, run by the fantastic Rebecca Python over there. Now you did a piece of that called "Go for a Walk," and it was me and Amanda played it for me. Absolutely loved it. We did. So I know it's different in sound tone to what you're doing now for your which current book you've been keep publishing. But tell us about this piece then.
So I wrote it actually for, there's a night that happens in Manchester I think it's every February, called Reclaim the Night, which has been going for decades and decades.
I think it is February, yeah.
And it's about women feeling safe on the streets, basically. Because every time there's some sort of gendered attack against women, the rhetoric is always, oh, you should stay at home, you should be safe. And Reclaim the Night is a sort of reaction against that. Like, no, don't tell me to stay at home. You should be trying to keep us safe instead. So I wrote this piece to perform at Reclaim the Night a few years ago. And it's just one of those things that I feel like is really sadly relevant so often. And basically the inspiration for the piece is that if you ask women, what would you do if there were no men around for a day? What would you do if men had a curfew and weren't allowed out? And they'll just say, oh, I'd go for a walk. I'd go for a walk outside by myself, because it's something that never feels safe. And I always wish it did. So that was the inspiration for that piece. And when Rebecca at Blue Balloon was asking for sort of videos, I thought this would be a really interesting thing to do. And I sort of called on a lot of my friends to be like, can you just take a video of your feet walking for a few steps so I can mash it up into this. So most of the video is like people's feet recorded from above, just walking. And that was they're my friends who've sent me videos of like 30 seconds. I'm like, I know this is really weird, but I promise it's for a reason.
It's very poignant, certainly with this one actually, because I played it about twice a day, and I love the way that you can see all the steps walking up and down in it. See, it made it like it's every person, not just yourself, and a fantastic video, absolutely fantastic. It raises a very, very valid point, I think, straight away. So, well done. Okay, start winding down now, because obviously I want to give you plenty of time to read some pieces within the second half. What plans do you have next for your creativity?
So actually, as much as I am primarily a poet, recently all I want to write is flash fiction. I think you've sometimes just got to let yourself be taken where your creativity wants to take you. And recently I've just been writing loads of like kind of weird horror flash fiction, which is also probably unsurprisingly, having spoken to me about my poetry, the fact that I love horror is probably not that much of a shock.
Not much of a surprise there, definitely what you've been saying, hinting so
So I've currently been working on, I don't even know what it is right now. It's just a bunch of random horror flash fictions I'm going to try and find some homes for. And I was thinking I might rock up to like Ilaria's night, just stories.
Oh yeah, tremendous night. Yeah, I've done it twice.
Read something horrifying. I really like Ilaria's night.
We do.
I performed at it once, but because my poetry isn't exactly particularly narrative, it's always a bit of a struggle to pull something together that is a story. So I've done it once and I loved it. But I think they're probably the home for my really horrible little flash fictions.
It's really nice stuff there, because like it's I've been on more last year or so, more flash fiction myself, to be honest with you. And mine just, as Amanda says, does most time it's just weird fiction, as they call it.
Flash fiction is like the perfect way for weird fiction to exist, because you don't really need to resolve anything. You can just be like, here's some thoughts, here you go. And there doesn't need to be like a nice tidy conclusion, which I think is also why I like poetry. I always love the idea of writing a novel, but I'm not very good at a story. I'm just like kind of vibes and feelings.
Yeah, no, I know you mean completely right. It's the same for me. I've got several incomplete novels dangling around. So I'm going to determine to get one of them done, maybe two, but we'll see on that one. So
I have faith in you. You can do it.
Maybe someday, right? So okay, wrap up this part, Alice. We're going to be talking. Me, I know what I'm like, and I know what you're like. Started talking gibberish all night if not careful. So we'll let you do, as I always term now, the hard sell. Where can people find you if they wish to read your stuff, get in contact with you, etc.?
Yeah, the best place to find me is probably on Instagram. I do have a Twitter as well, but I'm never on there. So on Instagram, I'm at Alice Godliman. You can buy my book from Benke Publishing. You can ask me questions about my book on Instagram, and I will answer them and tell you how amazing it is and the fact that you should buy it.
You would answer. I always say you would answer any questions on your book within reason.
Within reason, yeah. But yes, you should absolutely buy my book if you think it sounds interesting, and it is interesting. So
I've loved it. It was a really good book. So with that, then we'll take a quick break. Thank you, Alice, and hang around, everybody, because these poems are magnificent, okay, and very individualistic, as I've said several times already. I'll probably pronounce it completely wrong next time as well. But anyway, see you all. Two shakes of the dice.